A stagecoach stops short at a fork in the road where the driver will not go 1 mile farther. Wyoming spreads out gold and bronze under an October sky, cottonwoods burning yellow, the ridges beyond gone blue as bruises. The road forks. One prong climbs toward a valley of green pasture and Silver Creek. The other flees south, and there between them a woman stands alone with a single trunk in the dust. She is 26 years old. She has crossed 4 states on money she did not have to spare. She holds a letter folded soft as cloth, and every soul on that long road has gone silent at the same name. Now 3 riders come around the bend, not 1, 3, all in weathered canvas coats, hats pulled low, the same jaw held the same set way. She turns. The gold rains down through the cottonwoods, and somewhere ahead of her, behind a locked door at the end of a hallway, a key waits in a dark man's pocket. The stagecoach driver would not look at her. That was the 3rd time. Marigold Everhart had counted them the way another woman might have counted mile markers. First, the station clerk in Cheyenne. He had taken her fare, written her ticket, heard the name Nathaniel Culpepper, and gone very still, then had said only, "Well, God be with you," and turned back to his ledger. Second, the woman 2 seats over on the coach, a farmer's wife with hands like river stones. She had asked where Marigold was headed, heard the answer, pressed her lips into a line as thin as a blade, and stared out the window for the rest of the ride. Now the driver. He was a man of maybe 50, beard gone gray at the corners of his mouth, weathered hands loose on the reins, and he would not look at her when she asked how much farther to Cottonwood Fork. "Ma'am," he finally said, the way a man's voice goes when he has decided not to lie, but also not to say too much. "I'll take you as far as the fork, not past it. Culpepper land starts beyond the cottonwoods yonder. That's where I turn back." "Why not past it?" He did not answer at first. Then quietly, "Ain't my place to speak on another man's reputation. You'll form your own mind soon enough, I reckon." Marigold folded her hands over the letter in her lap. The letter had been folded and refolded so many times, the creases had gone soft as cloth. She had read it in Zanesville, Ohio, in the room above the print shop where her father had died 2 months before. She had read it on the train through Missouri. She had read it on the coach through Nebraska. She had read it last night in the boarding house in Cheyenne with the lamp burning low, and every reading had shown her the same thing, a man's hand, careful, blocky, the letters written slowly, like a man who did not write often, or a man who had to think hard about every word. "Miss Everhart, I am told you would consider a proposal of marriage. I am not a man given to letters, but I will offer you what I have, a house, a share of the land, a wage of $30 a month if you find you cannot stay, and respect, though not affection, for affection is a thing I no longer know how to give. I would ask you only to come. Yours in earnest, Nathaniel Culpepper." She had told herself in Ohio that a letter written that plainly could not have come from a cruel man. She was not so sure now, because a cruel man did not need to be loud. A cruel man could be a silence a whole valley kept. She looked out the window. Wyoming rolled past, gold, bronze, the color of the last week of October, aspen fires burning up the hillsides, cottonwoods yellow along the creek beds, and far off blue as bruises the ridges of the Wolfsbane Hollow country, where she was going, where a man she had never met was waiting to marry her, or where he was not. She could not tell which frightened her more. She was 26 years old. She had crossed 4 states on money she did not have to spare. Her father was 3 months buried under a debt she still owed the undertaker for. Her mother had been 14 years buried under nothing but a wooden cross she had carved herself with a paring knife when she was 12. She had 2 dresses in her trunk, a Bible with her mother's name written in the front cover, and a wedding band in a scrap of paper in her pocket that a man in another state had sent her through the post. That was the whole of her worldly estate. That, and this letter. The coach came around a low rise and the driver reined in. There, he said, pointed with his chin. That stand of cottonwoods yonder. Forks just past. This is where I set you down. Marigold looked. The road forked at a stand of yellow trees. One prong went northwest up into a valley she could just see the mouth of. Green pasture, a silver ribbon of creek, cattle like flecks of pepper on the grass. The other went south, toward the ridge, toward wherever else people in this country went when they did not want to go up that other road. Is somebody meant to meet me? Reckon so. You reckon? Wrote to your Mr. Culpepper last month, the driver said, climbing down. He would not meet her eyes even now. Pulled her trunk down from the coach roof with the careful strength of a man who has done it 1,000 times. Set it in the dust of the road. Sent word what day you'd be arriving. Whether he'll be here or not, that's between him and his conscience. But I reckon. He looked up the northwest fork. Then, almost against his will, he softened. Ma'am, if nobody comes in an hour, you wave down the mail rider. He'll be through by 4. He'll carry you back to town. You hear me? Yes. Don't try to walk it. No. And ma'am, yes. He hesitated. Then, don't listen to everything they'll tell you in the valley yonder. Not everything they say is true, but don't disbelieve it all either. Do you understand what I'm telling you? She did not. Yes, she lied. I touched his hat, climbed back up, and the coach rattled away down the South Fork toward wherever people went when they were leaving the Culpepper country. She stood in the road with her trunk and her canvas bag and her mother's Bible pressed against her ribs under her coat, and the letter. The wind moved through the cottonwoods and rained a shower of small gold coins down over her hair and her shoulders and the dust of the road. She was still standing there gathering her nerve when the horses came. She heard them before she saw them. 3 sets of hoofbeats coming down the northwest fork at an unhurried walk. Not one horse, 3, which was the first thing that made no sense because she was marrying one man. She turned, and in the slant of the October afternoon, 3 riders came around the bend. They were the same man. That was the first thought that came into her head. Not that they were 3 men, not that they were riders, not that any of the polite thoughts a woman is supposed to think when she meets her future husband for the first time came to her at all. The first thought was that they were the same man 3 times over, and she had gone mad from the journey. Then, as they drew closer, she saw the differences, but the sameness was still what struck her first. The same tall build, same broad shoulders, same jaw held in the same set way, same dark chestnut hair with sun caramel in it, same eyes the pale color of creek water in shadow, same weathered canvas coats, same hats pulled low against the low sun. 3 of them, riding abreast, coming for her. The man in the middle rode a length ahead of the other 2. He stopped 10 paces off, swung down, took off his hat. And she saw then that he was perhaps a little older than the other 2, maybe 2-3 years. There was gray already coming in at the temples
where the hat had covered the hair. His eyes went over her the way a man's eyes go over weather rolling in from the north, assessing, not unkind, but giving nothing away. "Miss Everhart," he said, not a question. "Mr. Culpepper." "Nathaniel," he said, as though clarifying which one, which was when she understood. Her mouth went dry. "There are 3 of you." "Yes, ma'am." "Your letter did not mention that." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, not exactly. Gone before she could be certain it had been there at all. "No, ma'am, it didn't." The other 2 had ridden up now, reined in, sat their horses without dismounting, watching her the way the ranch hands would watch her later. She would come to know, that careful waiting look, like men who have seen women arrive here before and leave here before. "This is Ellison," Nathaniel said, nodding to the one on the right. "And Micah." Ellison touched his hat. Micah, the youngest, actually smiled, a small, quick smile, gone as fast as his older brother's. "Ma'am," Micah said. She could not think what to say, because she had been prepared to marry a stranger. She had not been prepared for 3 of them. "There is a matter," Nathaniel said. Then he stopped. Then he began again. "There is a matter I should have set down in the letter, and did not, and I am asking you to hear me out before you decide anything. Decide whether to stay." The wind moved through the cottonwoods. The gold rained down. Marigold Everhart, 26 years old, of Zanesville, Ohio, stood in the middle of a road at the edge of a valley. She had crossed 4 states to reach, and understood that she was about to be asked to make a decision she had thought she had already made. "Then say it, sir." Nathaniel Culpepper looked at his boots. Then he looked at her. "Our father," he said, "left the land in a will, and he wrote the will so that none of us 3 can hold the land separate from the other 2. If one of us marries, all of us live under the same roof with the wife. Because the house sits on land no one of us owns alone. That was his condition. He set it down when I was 20, and Ellison was 18, and Micah was 16, and we had just buried our mother. He set it down, I believe, because he was afraid we would scatter, or that our wives would scatter us. So, you would have me marry you, yes, and live under one roof, yes, with 3 men, yes." She looked at Ellison. Ellison, 32 years old, cut like a man who had once been a soldier and had never quite come home from it, missing 2 fingers from his left hand, looked back at her without flinching. She looked at Micah. Micah, 30 years old, the softest looking of the 3 of them, though softness in a Culpepper appeared to be a relative measurement, looked back at her with something in his eyes that was not quite pity and not quite hope, but somewhere carefully placed between them. She looked at Nathaniel. Nathaniel, 34, said, "You can turn around. The mail rider comes by at 4. I will pay your fare back to Cheyenne, and a stipend besides for the trouble I caused you. I did not tell you in the letter because I thought if I told you, you would not come, and I thought if I could speak to you plain in person you might, but I will not hold you to a thing you did not agree to." The wind moved, the cottonwoods rained. Marigold thought, because a woman with 2 dresses and a debt owed to an undertaker did not have many places she could go back to, and because the man in front of her had just done a thing she had not been prepared for either. He had told her the truth when a lie would have kept her. She said, "I will come to your house, Mr. Culpepper. I have not agreed to marry anyone yet, but I will come see your house." Nathaniel Culpepper let out a breath. She had not realized he had been holding it. "Yes, ma'am." He turned, whistled once, low, and a fourth horse she had not noticed came trotting down the northwest fork, a gentle bay mare, saddled for a woman, riderless, brought for her, she understood, though he had not been sure until this moment he would have anyone to bring it for. Ride or walk, ride I suppose, though I have not been on a horse since I was a girl. Something moved at the corner of Nathaniel Culpepper's mouth again. Then we will go slow. He helped her up. His hands were firm and careful, as though he had measured out exactly how much strength the task required, and used no more than that. It was the first thing about him that did not match what she had been braced for. They rode into the valley. The valley opened, green and gold and full of light. The cottonwoods walked away behind them, and Marigold, Everhart on a mare she did not know, in a country she did not know, between three men she did not know, rode toward the house at Cottonwood Fork. The ranch house sat at the head of the little valley, 2 stories, gray weathered wood, a porch that wrapped around the front and one side. There was a barn behind, a bunkhouse, a cluster of outbuildings arranged neat and workmanlike, fences that had been recently mended, a cattle pen, and beyond past the paddock, the ground rose in a slow shoulder of pasture that climbed up toward the higher country where the pines began. It was a good house. That surprised her, because she had been braced without knowing it for something meaner. 2 ranch hands stood in the yard as they rode in, not working, not exactly loitering either, just standing, watching, the way men stand when they have been told a woman is coming and they want to see with their own eyes what kind of woman would come here. They touched their hats when Nathaniel nodded to them. They did not speak. An older woman came out onto the porch. She had gray hair pinned up under a plain cotton kerchief, an apron dusted with flour, hands she was wiping on the apron as she came. She was maybe 60, maybe a little older. She looked at Marigold with an expression Marigold could not immediately read. Not surprise, not welcome exactly. Something gentler than either, something like an apology. "You made it then," the woman said. "Good. Come on in, dear. Let's get you settled before you hear too much talk you can't yet make sense of." Nathaniel dismounted, helped Marigold down, his hands again careful. "Mrs. Prentice," he said, "this is Miss Everhart." I gathered. She has not yet said whether she will stay. Mrs. Prentice looked at Marigold, looked at Nathaniel, looked back at Marigold, and in that look there was a whole conversation Marigold could not follow, but understood the shape of. It was the look of a woman who had lived long in this house, who had known the Culpepper boys since they were boys, who had perhaps hoped for this, and had been braced also for it not to happen. "Then let's get her fed," Mrs. Prentice said, "and warm, and she can decide after. Come, dear, that trunk of yours weighs less than a full milk pail, doesn't it? Is that all you brought?" "It is." Mrs. Prentice did not comment. She only nodded once, as though the smallness of the trunk had told her something about Marigold that she had wanted to know, and drew her inside. The house was clean. That was the first thing she noticed. Clean in the way a house is clean when a woman has kept it, not just tidy, not just wiped down. Clean the way rooms are when someone loves them. Wood floors polished with beeswax, braided rugs, a big iron stove throwing heat into the front kitchen, a long plank table with benches on either side and a single chair at the head, a shelf of books that surprised her, small and worn but there, a framed sampler on the wall that read in faded thread, "Bless this house." The front hall ran back from the door, 2 rooms on the right, 2 on the left, a staircase, and at the very end, a door, a plain wooden door with an iron lock on it, old, black, clearly still in use. She did not ask. Something in her, the same instinct that had counted the silences on her journey, told her this was not a question anyone would answer tonight, but her eyes went to it. Twice. The second time Mrs. Prentice saw, and Mrs. Prentice did what a wise woman does when she is not going to speak of a thing. She spoke of something else. Your room is upstairs, dear, first on the left. There's water in the pitcher. I'll bring you up some warm to wash your face in a moment. The boys will eat at 7. You come down when you are ready. And Miss Everhart. Yes. Mrs. Prentice put her hand on Marigold's arm, very briefly. Nathaniel is not a cruel man. Whatever they've told you in town, I'll say that plain. So, you don't spend your first night here, frightened for no cause. Then why does everyone speak of him the way they do? Mrs. Prentice's face did something complicated. Not sorrow, not caution, something folded in between. That's not mine to tell, dear. That's his, and I expect he'll tell it in his own time, if he tells it at all. She patted Marigold's arm and went back to the kitchen. Marigold went upstairs. Her room was small, a brass bed with a quilt on it, a washstand, a window that looked out over the pasture, a single lamp, a hook on the wall for her coat, and on the bedside table, someone had set out a small posy of yellow prairie flowers in a jelly jar. Marigold stood in the middle of the room and looked at the flowers, because someone had picked them for her today, before they had known whether she would come or not. She sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time since Zanesville, since the undertaker, since the letter, since the coach, she felt her eyes go hot. She did not cry. She was not, she had decided long ago, a woman who cried easily, but she pressed her hands flat against her knees, and she thought, I do not know who picked these, but somebody in this house was hoping I would come. Supper was quiet. Nathaniel sat at the head of the table, Ellison to his right, Micah to his left, Marigold across from Nathaniel at what she understood without being told had once been someone else's chair. Mrs. Prentice served roast chicken, potatoes, bread that was still warm, butter that had been churned that morning, green beans put up from the summer garden, a pot of coffee. Nobody spoke much. Nathaniel ate with the same careful economy he seemed to bring to everything. Ellison ate the way a soldier eats, fast, without looking at anyone. Micah, the youngest, was the only one who tried. Was the coach very long, Miss Everhart? 3 days from Omaha, Mr. Culpepper. Please, Micah, Micah. And before that, 6 days on the train. That is a long way. It is. Was it your first time on a train? Yes. Micah smiled, a real smile this time. Mine too. When Pa took us to St. Louis, I was 9. Nathaniel at the head of the table looked at his brother, and Micah, who had been about to say something else, did not say it. He looked down at his plate. The conversation, such as it had been, sank back into the wood. Marigold, without knowing exactly why, spoke. Mr. Culpepper, Nathaniel, have you any family nearby beyond the 3 of you? The question was mild, the kind of question a woman asks at a first supper. She saw it hit him before she understood she had said anything wrong. Something in his face closed like a shutter pulled fast against a storm. He said only, not anymore. Then he set down his fork. He wiped his mouth on his napkin. He said, Mrs. Prentice, that was fine. Miss Everhart, if you'll excuse me, I have stock to check before the light goes. And he stood, and he was gone. The screen door slapped shut behind him. Ellison and Micah did not look up. Mrs. Prentice, after a moment, said, "More coffee, dear, please." She stayed at the table another quarter hour for politeness, then went up to her room. She undressed by the lamp, braided her hair, knelt by the bed, and said the prayer her mother had taught her when she was 5 years old. "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." And then, because she did not know what else to ask, she said, "And Lord, if it is your will that I should stay in this house, show me a sign, and if it is not your will, give me the courage to leave." She climbed into the bed. The wind moved through the cottonwoods outside her window. She did not sleep for a long time. She thought about the road, the 3 silences, the 3 riders, Nathaniel Culpepper's careful hands, the way he had said not anymore, the locked door at the end of the hall, the jelly jar of yellow flowers on her bedside table, and she thought, I have come to a house that has a story in it, and no one in it is going to tell it to me. Not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but I have come this far, and I do not think I am leaving yet. She fell asleep with her mother's Bible on the pillow beside her. Morning came pale and cool, mist clinging low over the pasture. Marigold woke to the sound of someone already moving about the house. Quiet footsteps on the stair, the clink of a stove being fed, the particular hush of a household that had learned to keep its noise to itself. She dressed, came downstairs. Mrs. Prentice was at the stove. There was no sign of any of the 3 brothers. "They're out with the herd before first light most days," Mrs. Prentice said, without being asked, setting a plate down for her. "Back by midday mostly. Sit, dear, eat. You look like you slept about as well as I expected." Mrs. Prentice: "Yes, dear. Is that door at the end of the hall always locked?" Mrs. Prentice's hands stilled over the skillet, just for a moment, not long, but long enough that Marigold noticed. "It is." "What is in it?" Mrs. Prentice set the skillet aside. She looked at Marigold with an expression that was not unkind. "They're mother's things," she said, slowly, as though she had chosen the path through a room she knew had loose boards. "And some of their little brothers. Nathaniel does not like it disturbed. That is all I will say, and more than I should have. Their little brother. That's not my telling either, dear. Eat your breakfast." Marigold ate her breakfast. The eggs were very good. She did not press. She had learned already in less than 1 day that this was not a household you pressed. This was a household you waited on, the way you waited on weather, patient, unhurried, trusting that the sky would eventually do what skies do. She spent the morning learning the house. Mrs. Prentice showed her the root cellar, the smokehouse, the way Nathaniel liked his coffee strong and without sugar, the way Ellison liked his coffee weak and with cream, the way Micah did not drink coffee at all, but preferred a cup of hot water with a slice of lemon in it, because he had never taken to the taste of coffee, even as a boy. Information offered up in small domestic fragments that told Marigold how to keep this house, but nothing of how to know it. Near noon, Mrs. Prentice said, "I need thread and salt and a bolt of muslin. I was going to send one of the hands into town this afternoon, but I thought perhaps you might like to come. See Elmwood. That is our nearest town. It's about 6 miles. We can be back by supper." Yes, please. She wanted badly to be out of the house, not because the house frightened her, but because a woman does not learn a country by sitting inside 4 walls. They took a spring wagon. Mrs. Prentice drove. The road went out past the barn, along the fence line, down through a cut in the hills, that opened onto the wider road running east. The country was very beautiful, October at its full ripeness, cottonwoods gold, aspens quaking, the sky the particular hard clean blue of high plains autumn. Marigold rode with her hands folded in her lap, and she thought about the door. She thought about the little brother. She thought about not anymore. Elmwood was small, a main street, a church at the north end, a saloon at the south, a mercantile, a blacksmith, a boarding house, a bank, a barber, a livery, a schoolhouse a little apart from the rest, painted white with a bell on top. Perhaps 300 souls if you counted the farms and ranches within riding distance. The kind of town that knew everybody in it, which meant it would know her too. By supper time, they tied up at the mercantile. Mrs. Prentice went inside. Marigold walked a few paces down the boardwalk, just to stretch her legs, just to breathe air that did not smell of horse and hay. A woman came out of the milliner's shop next door. Older woman, perhaps 55, iron gray hair pinned very severely, a face that had once been pretty and had been ground down by something more permanent than time. She wore black, full mourning black, the kind of black a woman wears when she has been wearing it for a long time. She saw Marigold. She stopped. She looked, and her whole face changed, not to anger, that would come later, to pain, raw and open, like a wound that had never scabbed. "You are the one," she said, and her voice was flat. "I beg your pardon. The one Nathaniel Culpepper sent for." Marigold said, "I am Miss Everhart." "You are the fool," the woman said. "Fool enough to come here. Has he told you yet what he did to my boy, or is he still letting this town do his confessing for him?" Marigold's heart began to hammer. "I do not know what you mean, ma'am." "He killed my son." The words came out of the woman's mouth quietly, almost tenderly, like a mother saying good night, which was worse than if she had shouted. "My son was named Ansel Kerrigan. He was 27 years old when he died. He was the best young man in this valley. He was Nathaniel Culpepper's friend since they were 4, and Nathaniel Culpepper let him die under the hooves and has never once said he was sorry. Not to me, not to anyone. And now Nathaniel Culpepper has sent to Ohio and gotten himself a bride who does not know his name yet. So I will tell you his name. His name is the man who killed my Ansel. You take that home to Cottonwood Fork tonight, Miss Everhart. You lay that beside you in your bed, and you tell me tomorrow whether you can sleep." Marigold could not speak. She could not. The woman walked past her, down the boardwalk, away. Mrs. Prentice came out of the mercantile with a paper-wrapped bundle in her arms and stopped when she saw Marigold's face. She looked down the boardwalk. She saw the woman in black walking away. She closed her eyes for a moment. She said, "Oh dear." "Mrs. Prentice, come, get in the wagon." "Mrs. Prentice, who was that woman?" "In the wagon, dear. I will tell you on the road, but not in the middle of the street." They drove out of Elmwood in silence. Once they were past the last house. Once the road was only theirs. Mrs. Prentice said, "That was Prudence Kerrigan. She lost her only son 3 years ago, this coming December. Her husband had died the spring before that. She has been in black more than 3 years now. She used to teach the Sunday school at the church, and now she does not go to church at all. She stopped when they buried Ansel. She said Nathaniel killed her son. I know what she said. Is it true?" Mrs. Prentice was quiet a long time, long enough that Marigold thought the answer might simply be yes. Then she said, 3 years back in the December. Ansel Kerrigan and Nathaniel had been checking the north pasture. Weather had come up bad, a storm off the mountain. Something spooked the cattle. Whole herd broke and ran. Nathaniel was thrown from his horse, hurt bad, could not move, and Ansel Kerrigan rode back in through the running herd to pull him clear, and Nathaniel got out, and Ansel did not. Marigold pressed her hand against her mouth. That is not killing him. No, dear. Then why? Because after, Mrs. Prentice said. Because after. Ansel's mother came to Cottonwood Fork and asked Nathaniel to tell her plain that he did not know Ansel was going to ride back for him. And Nathaniel would not answer her. He would not defend himself. He would not say, I asked him. And he would not say, I did not ask him. He said nothing. And that silence, dear, that silence has fed this town for 3 years. Because if he had said one word, one, Prudence Kerrigan might have laid it down, but he did not. Why did he not? Mrs. Prentice did not answer. Marigold said, Mrs. Prentice, that is not my telling. You have told me the rest. Mrs. Prentice's hands tightened on the reins. Then she said quietly, Nathaniel Culpepper has never been able to speak of Ansel Kerrigan, not once, not to me, not to his brothers, not to that man's mother. I have known him since he was 9 years old, dear, and I will tell you this, he is not a cruel man, he is a grieving one, and he has forgotten how to let it show as anything but silence. This town calls that coldness. I call it a man who has never once let himself be forgiven, not even by his own self. They rode the last 2 miles without speaking. The valley opened before them. Cottonwood Fork, home. She did not sleep that night either. She lay in the little brass bed with the jelly jar of yellow flowers on the bedside table and the wind moving through the cottonwoods outside her window, and she thought about Prudence Kerrigan's face on the boardwalk, and she thought about Nathaniel Culpepper setting down his fork the night before at the word family, and she thought about a locked door sometime past midnight, because she could not lie still any longer, because a woman with a Bible under her pillow can only pray so many times before she has to get up and go look. She rose. She wrapped her mother's shawl around her nightgown. She took the lamp. She went barefoot down the stairs, because a house that keeps its silences deserves to have its floors not creaked. She went to the end of the hall, and she was going to try the door. She did not know what she thought she would find. She knew only that a locked door in a house where nobody would speak was a door she needed to lay her hand on before she could sleep. She reached for it, and she stopped, because Nathaniel Culpepper was already there. He stood in front of the door, in his shirt sleeves, his boots in one hand as though he had come down as quietly as she had, and in his other hand, a key, old iron, held tight. He was not opening the door. I was standing before it with the key in his fist, looking at it as though he had come here to open it, and could not, as he had perhaps come and stood before it 100 nights before, and gone back up the stairs. He heard her. He turned. The lamp caught his face, and Marigold Everhart saw for the first time what the town of Elmwood had never seen in 3 long years. Not coldness, not fury, not the granite face he wore for his brothers and his hands and every stranger who came down the road. Grief, old and bone deep, and so worn from being carried alone that it did not even weep any more. It only looked back at her out of a man's eyes that had until this moment been closed against her. He did not speak. He put the key back in his pocket. He walked past her. He did not touch her. He did not look at her again. I went up the stairs in his stocking feet with his boots in his hand, and Marigold Everhart, 26 years old, of Zanesville, Ohio, stood alone in the hallway of a house she had come across 4 states to see, and she looked at the locked door at the end of it, and she understood with a cold, clean certainty that surprised her that she was not going home, not yet, because whatever was behind that door, whatever had built the silences that had followed her here from Cheyenne, whatever had put Prudence Kerrigan in black for more than 3 years and left Nathaniel Culpepper standing in the dark of his own hallway, holding a key he could not use. She had come this far, and she was going to see it through. She lifted her hand from the door. She went back up the stairs. She lay down in the little brass bed, and she prayed, not the words her mother had taught her, her own words. Lord, I do not know what you have brought me to, but I know you have brought me, and I do not think you brought me this far to leave. Amen. The wind moved through the cottonwoods. Somewhere out in the pasture a coyote called once and fell silent, and in the room across the hall a man she had not yet decided whether she would marry lay awake, with a key still burning cold in his pocket, and thought for the first time in 3 years that perhaps he had been wrong to send that letter. Or perhaps, for the first time, perhaps he had not. The morning after she had stood in the hall and seen him at the door, Marigold Everhart came downstairs, and Nathaniel Culpepper was already gone. Mrs. Prentice did not remark on it. She only set down a plate, poured coffee, and said, "Ellison is going to teach you to ride today, if you are willing. Nathaniel says the mare is gentle, but she is a horse, and you have not been on one since you were a girl." Nathaniel said, "When?" Mrs. Prentice looked up from the stove, small, quiet smile at the corner of her mouth. "Before first light, in the yard, while he was saddling. He said that, dear," which was the second thing Nathaniel Culpepper had done that did not match what she had been braced for, because a man who had stood at a locked door in the middle of the night and not opened it, a man who had walked past her in his stocking feet without a word, that man had gone out into the dark of a Wyoming October morning and told his brother to teach his mail order bride to ride, which meant he had thought about her before he had thought about the cattle. Marigold sat down at the table. She ate her eggs, and she did not say to Mrs. Prentice what she was thinking, which was, "He is still trying," which was, "I have not yet decided whether to stay," but something in her small and stubborn and quiet as the yellow flowers on her bedside table had decided anyway. The days settled, the way days settle. Ellison Culpepper turned out to be a very good teacher. I was 32 years old and missing 2 fingers on his left hand, and he did not speak much, but when he did speak, he spoke to be understood. He walked the mare around the yard with Marigold on her back for the better part of an hour that first morning. He did not laugh when she gripped the pommel like a drowning woman. He did not sigh when she asked the same question twice. He only said once, "Hands soft, heels down. The horse can feel you thinking, so think easy things." What things? Anything easy. She thought about her mother's garden in Zanesville, the row of hollyhocks against the shed. The mare's ears twitched and settled. Ellison, watching, said, "Better." That was the whole of the conversation, but he came out every morning after that, for an hour, sometimes 2, and by the 4th day she could trot without falling forward, and by the 6th day she could turn the mare in a wide, slow circle, and on the 7th day, when Ellison thought she was not looking, she saw him smile, small, gone in a second. But there, which was the first time she had seen an Ellison Culpepper smile at all, she thought, he has not smiled in a while, she thought. I do not know why, she thought. I am going to be careful with that smile, because it looked like a thing that could be broken very easily. Micah Culpepper was another matter entirely.
Micah was 30 years old, and he was the youngest, and he was also, she began to understand the older two brothers had spent their lives protecting. Not because he was weak. He was not weak. He could split cordwood the way another man might crack an egg, but because there was a softness in him that his brothers did not have, or had lost, or had buried on a cold December afternoon 3 years ago in a pasture. Micah played a mouth harp on the porch in the evenings. He read. I was the only one who read. The little shelf of books in the front room was his, and on the third evening after her arrival, when the wind was up and the kitchen smelled of cinnamon from a pie Mrs. Prentice had baked, Micah came into the kitchen with a small worn book and set it on the table across from her. Mrs. Prentice said you had your mother's Bible. I do. Do you read it? Every day. He smiled. Nothing careful in it, just glad. Then would you read to us of an evening, when the work is done? My mother used to, and I have not heard it in a woman's voice since I was 8 years old. Marigold looked at him. She thought, since he was 8, which was however many years ago his mother had died, which was, she did not know how many, but 8, and Nathaniel would have been 12, and Ellison would have been 10, and she thought about what a house sounds like when a woman has stopped reading in it. I will read, she said, after supper, after supper. He did not touch her hand. He did not do anything unseemly. He only nodded once and went back out to the porch where his mouth harp was, but she heard him whistling as he went, and she thought, something in this house has been closed a long time, and I do not know if I am opening it, or if it is only reaching for something and I happen to be here, but something. Nathaniel was harder. Nathaniel worked. He rose before light and came in after dark, and in between he did the things a man does who owns a working ranch in the Wyoming Territory. In October of 1878, he mended fence. He rode the herd. He rode the boundary. He sat in the barn with a lantern and repaired tack. He did not eat lunch. He did not sit in the front room in the evenings. He did not read scripture with her when she read it aloud after supper. He did not read it either. I would come in from the yard just as she began, and he would stand by the door, and he would take his hat off, and he would listen with his hand on the door frame and his eyes on the floor, and when she had finished, he would put his hat back on and go back out. He never spoke of it. She never asked him to. She thought, he is a man learning to be near a thing he has not been near in a long time. You do not startle a horse like that. You wait. She waited. They talked sometimes, in fragments, about the ranch, about the weather, once about her father when Nathaniel asked, and she told him about the print shop in Zanesville and the debt and the way her father had gone quiet in the last month before he died. Nathaniel listened. He did not offer sympathy. He did not need to. His silence, she was learning, was a shape of listening, not an absence. Then on the 9th day the sheep came, not sheep the Culpeppers owned. Sheep the Culpeppers did not own, because that was the point. Micah rode in at midday. His face was gray. He said, Nate, you need to come. That was all he said. Nathaniel put down his coffee cup and walked out with him. Marigold went to the window. She saw the two brothers stand in the yard.
Micah pointed north. Nathaniel's face did the thing it did when it stopped being a face and became a wall. He whistled once. Ellison came out of the barn. The three brothers rode out. Mrs. Prentice stood beside Marigold at the window. She said, "Dear, come away from the glass." "What is it, Mrs. Prentice?" "I do not know yet, and what I do not know I do not want to guess at." But Mrs. Prentice's hands were shaking as she picked up the coffee pot, which told Marigold that Mrs. Prentice knew perfectly well, or had guessed, or had been afraid this was coming for a long time. They came back at dusk, the three of them, riding slow, dust on their boots. Something in Ellison's face that Marigold had not seen there before, not grief. He carried grief the way a man carries an old wound in his shoulder. That was constant. This was newer. This was fury. Nathaniel came into the kitchen and set something on the table. A piece of paper, a folded piece of paper. He had unfolded it and refolded it, and it was creased hard from his fist. "Read it," he said, to Marigold, not to Mrs. Prentice, to her. She picked it up. The handwriting was crude, deliberately crude, the way handwriting is crude when a man does not want to be recognized. It said, "Blood answers blood. You have begged the debt long enough." She looked up. "Where?" "Nailed to a fence post. North boundary. 22 dead sheep in the pasture below it. Poisoned. They were driven onto our land in the night, so it would look like ours, and so a man in Elmwood tomorrow morning can say, 'The Culpeppers have started poisoning stock.' But you did not." "No, Miss Everhart, we did not." Ellison behind him said, "Someone wants him hanged and has decided to stop being subtle about it." "Ellison," Nathaniel said. "Quiet. Warning." Ellison went silent, but it was too late, because Marigold had heard it. Hanged, which was not a word a man used lightly. She said, "Nathaniel, who would want you hanged?" Nathaniel looked at her a long moment. Then he said, "Ma'am, that is a long story, and I am tired, and I am going to wash for supper." He went out. Ellison and Micah followed. Marigold stood in the kitchen with a piece of paper in her hand, and she thought, "Blood answers blood," which meant there is a blood already owed, which she had been told in the milliner's shop in a widow's voice by a mother in mourning black, owed to Ansel Kerrigan, except that Ansel Kerrigan had died in an accident, or had he? She folded the paper very carefully. She put it in the pocket of her apron, and she thought, "I am going to open the storeroom tomorrow morning. I do not know why, but I am." The storeroom was off the back kitchen. It had once, Mrs. Prentice told her, when she asked, been a pantry, then a nursery, then a storeroom, then more recently whatever no one could bear to put anywhere else. Mrs. Prentice did not go in there, not because it was forbidden, because there was nothing in it she wanted. Marigold went in on the 10th morning while Mrs. Prentice was in the smokehouse, and the brothers were in the north pasture bearing the sheep. The room smelled of dust and cedar and old paper. There were shelves, trunks, a rocking chair with a broken runner, a child's wooden horse lying on its side, a dressmaker's dummy with no dress, and on a low shelf near the door, in a wooden box that had once she guessed held tea, a bundle of letters, tied with a piece of string. She sat down on an overturned barrel and she untied them. She was not looking for anything. She would tell herself that later. She was only looking for a piece of paper to line the shelf in her room with, because that was what a woman did when she was trying to make a room her own. But her hand found the bundle. Her hand untied it, and she began to read. Most of them were nothing. A cousin in Missouri who wrote badly, a cattle broker in Cheyenne, a schoolmaster in Chicago who had once apparently tutored Micah when Micah was 14 and had spent a season in the city with an aunt. Nothing, except the letter at the bottom of the stack, which was in a different hand, a young man's hand, careful and firm, dated December 4th, 1875, which was a week before Ansel Kerrigan had died. Marigold's hands went cold. She read, "Nate, I do not want to write this, and I hope you never have to read it, but I have been turning it in my head 3 nights now, and if I do not set it down, I will lose my nerve, so set it down I will. I is not what he looks like. I have been in his office twice this month, once to sign the note against Ma's South Quarter, and once to ask him about the water rights on the creek. And the second time I saw a paper on his desk I was not meant to see. It was a survey map, and on it the north boundary of your ranch is drawn wrong. It is drawn wide of where it ought to be, wide by 300 yards, which puts the spring on our side of your line and not on yours, and there is a mark on it in his own hand, red pencil, where the spring is, which means he knows about the spring, Nate, which means he has known for some time and has been drawing it wrong on purpose. I do not know yet what he means to do with that map, but I do not think he means anything good, and I have said too much in his hearing already, because when I saw the map I could not help my face, and he saw me see it. I am telling you this because you are the only man in this valley I would trust to know it and not tell it to the wrong person, and I am asking you, Nate, if anything happens to me, anything, do not let my mother know, not the truth of it. She has lost too much already. She has lost my sister in '59 and my father last spring, and I will not have her lose my name too by making her carry a fight she did not ask for. Let her think it was an accident. Let her think it was the will of God. She has that much left. Let her keep it. I hope I am a fool, and this is nothing. I hope you tear this up and laugh at me next Sunday. But if I am not a fool, Nate, you watch the spring, because whatever he is doing, he means to have that water, and if he means to have it, he means to have this whole ranch, and you and your brothers are the only thing between him and it. Your friend since we were boys, Ansel Kerrigan. Marigold sat on the overturned barrel with the letter in her hands, and she did not move, because Ansel Kerrigan had known. He had known a week before he died that someone was going to try to take Cottonwood Fork, and someone had, or someone had tried, and whoever it was had started with him. She read the letter 3 times. She looked at the date. She looked at the handwriting. She thought, he is not what he looks like. Who was he? She turned the letter over. There was no name. Ansel had been too careful to write it. He had trusted that Nathaniel would know without being told. But she did not know. She knew only that in Elmwood there was a judge, because Mrs. Prentice had mentioned him once, in passing, when explaining who kept the papers for the ranch. A Judge Radcliffe, Cyrus Radcliffe, who held the paper on nearly every loan in the county. She folded the letter. She put it inside her Bible. She retied the bundle. She put it back on the shelf, and she thought, Nathaniel does not know, because if Nathaniel knew what was in this letter, he would not be a man standing at a locked door in the middle of the night with a key he cannot use. He would be a man riding into Elmwood with a rope. which meant Ansel had never given him this letter, which meant Ansel had died before he could, which meant this letter had come to the ranch some other way. Marigold went out of the storeroom. She closed the door. She stood in the back kitchen and pressed her hand flat against her chest until her heart stopped hammering. She thought, I am going to have to tell him. She thought, not yet. She thought, not until I know more, because a woman who has just read a dead man's last warning does not run to her almost husband with it before breakfast. She thinks, she waits, she prays. Marigold Everhart, 26 years old, walked back to the front kitchen. She put a kettle on, and she began to think. She was still thinking 3 days later, which was when the storm came. Nathaniel had ridden out at dawn to check the west line. By 10 in the morning, the sky over the mountain had turned the color of wet slate. By 11, the wind was up. By noon, the first hard flakes were coming sideways. Micah stood at the kitchen window and said without turning around, "He should be back by now." Ellison said, "He will be." Micah said, "He is not." Ellison put his coat on. He said, "I will ride the west line and meet him coming in." Marigold said, "I am coming." Both brothers turned. Ellison said, "Ma'am." She said, "I can ride now." Ellison, "You taught me. I am not slowing you. I am helping you cover ground. You take the north cut. I will take the fence line south from the barn. If he came in the other way, he will hit that road." Ellison looked at her. Ellison, who did not smile, and who did not argue with women, and who did not ever, in his adult life, take counsel from someone who had been on a horse for 11 days. Ellison said, "Micah, get her the black. He is faster." And it was Marigold who found him, not Ellison. Marigold. She found him 1.5 miles from the house, in the lee of an old lambing shed at the edge of the west pasture. His horse had gone lame in the storm. He had walked the horse 2 miles in the wind and the snow, and he had been trying to make the shed before the light went, and he had, but only just. He was sitting against the shed wall on the leeward side. His coat was crusted with ice. His hat was gone. His hands were bare and blue. He looked up when she rode in. He said her name, not Miss Everhart, not ma'am. He said Marigold, the first time he had said it aloud. She got down off the black. She led both horses into the shed. She helped him inside, because he could not stand on his own, because his knee had given somewhere in the last quarter mile, and he had walked the last of it on it anyway. The shed was dry. That was the first mercy. There was a lantern hanging from a nail. That was the second. There was a stack of dry lambing straw in the far corner. That was the third. There was a small tin box on the shelf with a striker and matches sealed in wax paper against damp. That was the fourth. She lit the lantern. She built a small, careful fire on the dirt floor in the ring of stones that generations of Culpeper men had used for exactly this purpose. She wrapped him in her coat. She took off his boots. She rubbed his hands between her own. "Marigold, do not talk yet. You should not have come. I came. You should not have. I came. You could have gotten yourself killed. I came because that was the only argument that mattered. She had come." He stopped protesting. He watched her instead, his eyes on her hands as she worked at his fingers, blue turning to red, red turning to color that could be called human. He watched her the way a man watches a thing he has decided to memorize. She said, "Nathaniel." "Yes, I need to tell you something." "Not yet." "When?" "Later." "Not yet. Just." He closed his eyes. He said, "Just sit here a little." She sat. The wind roared outside. The lantern threw yellow light on the low ceiling. And Nathaniel Culpepper's voice she had not heard him use before to speak. He spoke about his mother. Not much, but some. Her hair was the color of oak in autumn. She read them scripture in the evenings. She had a laugh that came from the bottom of her chest. She had wanted to be a school teacher when she was a girl in Illinois. She had married their father because he had promised her a house with a porch, and he had built her one. She had loved that porch. She had loved Barnaby. He said the name into the fire. Barnaby. Who was Barnaby? Nathaniel, my little brother. You have a little brother. Had. The fire crackled. He said Barnaby was 6, and he took the fever the winter I was 12. Ellison was 10, Micah was 8, and Barnaby was 6, and there was no doctor, because the doctor had gone to Cheyenne, because a rich man had paid him to come to Cheyenne for his wife's confinement, and by the time our doctor came back, Barnaby had been in the ground 3 days, and our mother had been in her bed for 2. Nathaniel, she got up on the 4th day. She dressed. She combed her hair. She made breakfast for us 3. She kissed each of us on the top of the head, and then she walked down to the creek, and she did not come back. Marigold did not speak, because there was nothing, because there is nothing to say to a man who has just told you his mother could not carry the weight of 1 dead child and left 3 living ones behind, because the weight had crushed her anyway. She sat. She put her hand on his shoulder. She left it there. He said our father did the rest of his living inside a bottle. He was not a cruel man. He was just gone. He kept us fed. He kept the land. But he was not there. Not really. I raised Ellison. Ellison raised Micah. Mrs. Prentice raised all 3 of us on the days our father could not. And when I was 20, and Ellison was 18, and Micah was 16, our father sobered up long enough to write a will. He said, "Boys, I am not leaving one of you this land, and not the others. I am not going to be the man that turns brothers into strangers, so the land is yours, all 3, together. And if any of you marries, she comes to this house, because there is only one house." The fire cracked. A knot popped. He died in 73, and the 3 of us buried him, and we ran this ranch, and we did not talk about Barnaby, and we did not talk about our mother, and we kept that door at the end of the hall locked, because we could not stand to open it, and we could not stand to throw the things away. And I have carried the key for 5 years, and I have not opened it once. Marigold said, "Nathaniel, yes. Why did you write to me?" He was quiet a long time. Then he said, because Ansel had been dead 3 years, and I had not spoken to a human being who did not know his name in 3 years, and I did not think I could speak to anyone in this valley again. And I thought, if she does not know, if she has not heard, if she comes from some place far, then maybe, just once, someone will look at me and not see the thing they all see, and I will know if I am still a man in there, or if I have gone the way my father went, only quieter. She said, "You are still a man. You do not know that. I do. You have known me 11 days. I have known you 11 days, she said, and I have known enough." He turned. He looked at her. The lantern light caught the water in his eyes. He did not weep. He did not know how, not yet, but she saw where the weeping was. She leaned forward. She rested her forehead against his, and she held it there. She did not kiss him, not that night. She only held her forehead against his, and she listened to a man breathe out something he had been holding in for 22 years. Outside, the wind moved. The fire settled to coals, and when at last she pulled back, she said, "Sleep, Nathaniel. I will keep the fire. Sleep. He slept, and she kept the fire, and whatever happened between them in the little lambing shed in the west pasture that night, with the storm hammering the roof and the lantern burning low, that was between them, and it was gentle. And when morning came and the storm had passed, and the sun rose gold and cold over a valley 3 inches deep in new snow, Nathaniel Culpepper looked at Marigold Everhart across the ashes of a small fire, and he said, I do not think I want you to leave. And she said, I am not leaving. And that was as much as either of them said. He took her the next afternoon to the family cemetery. It sat on a rise above the creek, behind the barn, under a stand of pines that leaned a little east because the wind that came down out of the mountain had leaned them that way for 80 years. 3 stones, small, local granite, weather-worn. He walked her to them. He stood with his hat off. He said, Mother, Elawin Culpepper, born 1823, died 1856. He moved to the second. Barnaby Culpepper, born 1850, died 1856, beloved of his brothers. He moved to the third. He stopped. Ansel Kerrigan, he said, born 1848, died 1875. He gave his life for his friend. Marigold read the stone. She read the last line twice. He gave his life for his friend. She said, Nathaniel. Yes, you put that. I did. And his mother. His mother has not been up here, not once, not since we buried him. Marigold looked at the stone. She thought of Prudence Kerrigan on the boardwalk of Elmwood. She thought of the letter in her Bible. She thought, he does not know yet. She said, Nathaniel, there is a thing I need to tell you. But she did not tell him. Not then, because at that moment they heard the horses coming up the road, more than one horse. Nathaniel turned. Ellison was already crossing the yard from the barn, Micah from the porch. 4 riders came up the road. 3 of them she did not know. The 4th she recognized, because he was tall and lean and wore a dark coat and a badge on the front of it that caught the low afternoon sun. The sheriff of Elmwood, and beside him on a chestnut gelding with a silver bit that would have paid a year of Marigold's father's debt, a man in a black frock coat, a silver watch chain across his vest, iron gray hair combed back from a high forehead, eyes like blue steel, Judge Cyrus Radcliffe. Nathaniel put his hat back on. He walked down from the graves. He said quietly over his shoulder, Marigold, go inside. Whatever happens now, you do not need to see it. She did not go inside. She stood by the pines. She watched. The judge dismounted. The sheriff dismounted. Judge Radcliffe removed a folded paper from inside his coat. He said in a voice that was pleasant and mild and carried across the yard the way a man's voice carries when he has spent his life speaking in courtrooms, Nathaniel Culpepper, there is a warrant for your arrest for the theft of 47 head of cattle from the Hollister Ranch 2 nights ago. There is a witness who saw you drive them. There is a brand book that has been altered. There is a bill of sale in your handwriting dated yesterday. I am here today because the Hollister Ranch is in my jurisdiction and because I felt as a matter of professional courtesy that I should serve this warrant myself. Nathaniel did not speak. Ellison did. Ellison said, you lying. Ellison, Nathaniel said. Ellison stopped, but the word he had not said was there. Nathaniel said, I did not steal any cattle, Judge. Then you will have opportunity to demonstrate that at trial. When? The circuit sits in 3 weeks. You will be held in Elmwood until then. The sheriff reached for his handcuffs. Nathaniel held out his wrists. He did not resist. He looked at Ellison. He looked at Micah. He looked past both of them at Marigold, standing under the pines, beside 3 headstones, in her mother's shawl. He mouthed something to her. She could not tell what, but she thought it was. Wait. The sheriff put him on his horse. The judge tipped his hat to Mrs. Prentice, who had come out onto the porch. He said, "Mrs. Prentice, good afternoon." Mrs. Prentice did not answer him. Judge Radcliffe smiled a very small, pleasant smile. He said, I know, you have never been fond of me. Well, that has never been a requirement in this valley." He mounted his gelding. He looked just for a moment up the rise, at the pines, at the stones, at the woman standing among them. His eyes lingered. Marigold felt them, cold and pale as slate. Then he turned his horse, and the 4 riders went back down the road toward Elmwood, with Nathaniel Culpepper between them. Marigold stood at the graves. She did not move for a long time. Ellison came up. He said, "Ma'am." "Ellison, I am going to town." "Ellison, listen to me." "Ma'am, I am going to." "Ellison, listen. If you go into Elmwood tonight and start swinging, they will hang him for cattle theft, and they will hang you for assaulting a sheriff, and Cottonwood Fork will be gone by Christmas," which is exactly what he wants. Ellison stopped. He looked at her. He said he. She said Judge Radcliffe. Ellison waited. She said, "Ellison, I know it. He wants this ranch. He has wanted it a long time, and he tried once, 3 years ago, and he did not get it, and now he is trying again." Ellison said, "How do you know that?" She said, "Because Ansel wrote it down, and I found the letter. Ellison Culpepper, cavalry sergeant, missing 2 fingers, 32 years old, hard as a knife handle, went perfectly still." He said, "Ma'am, you have that letter." "I have it. In your possession. In my Bible. On you. On me." He said, "Then we do not go to town swinging. We go to town looking, and we start tonight." He looked at the road where his brother had disappeared. He said, "Ma'am, what did they call you back in Ohio?" "Marigold." "Marigold, I am going to owe you my brother's life, and I do not know yet how to repay a thing like that." She said, "You do not owe me. You feed the cattle. I will do this piece." She walked down from the pines. She went inside. She got her mother's Bible. She took out the letter. She read it again by the front window in the afternoon light. "He is not what he looks like. He means to have that water. He means to have this whole ranch." And she thought, "I know his name now." She sat down at the table. She wrote 2 letters of her own, one to a man in Cheyenne who kept the records of the territorial surveyor, one to the pastor of the little Methodist church in Elmwood, who Mrs. Prentice had told her had baptized every Culpepper boy, including Barnaby, and who did not, in the pastor's own words, hold with judges who lied. She sealed them. She rode the black to town the next morning to post them. She did not go into the mercantile. She did not go into the milliner's. She went to the small house at the far end of Elmwood, the last house before the road out. A gray house, neat, with a black wreath still hanging on the door, almost 3 years after a young man's funeral. She knocked. She waited. No one came. She knocked again. She heard from inside a chair scrape. She heard footsteps come toward the door. She heard them stop. The door did not open. A voice on the other side said low, "Go away, Miss Everhart. I have nothing to say to you, and you have nothing to say to me that I want to hear." Marigold said, "I have your son's last letter." Silence. She said, "Mrs. Kerrigan, I have your son's last letter. written a week before he died, written to Nathaniel. It never reached him. I found it in a bundle of papers in the storeroom at Cottonwood Fork. I have read it, and I know now what your son knew, and I need you to know it too, because he asked in that letter that you never be told, and I understand why. But I think if he knew what I know today, I think he would want you to be told, because I do not believe your son died the way you believe he died.
Silence. Marigold's knees would not hold her. She knelt on the porch board in front of the closed door.
She said, Mrs. Kerrigan, I know you do not know me. I know I am the fool who came here from Ohio, but I am a woman whose own mother is 14 years in the ground, and I know what it is to carry a stone in your chest that will not roll. I know, and I am going to say a prayer at your door, because I do not know what else to do, and you do not have to open the door. You do not have to answer it, but I am going to pray. She closed her eyes. She said, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. She stopped. She said the next line slower, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. She said it again, as we forgive those who trespass against us. There was silence on the other side of the door. There was silence on the porch. Somewhere down the street, a wagon creaked. A dog barked twice and stopped. Marigold said, Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. She could not say amen, because a hand had come onto her hand. The door had opened. She had not heard it, but Prudence Kerrigan was kneeling on the porch board beside her, in her mourning black, her iron gray hair coming loose from its pins, her hand on Marigold Everhart's hand, her face wet with something that had not been on it in nearly 3 years. Prudence Kerrigan said in a voice so quiet Marigold almost did not hear it, Say the amen with me. They said the amen together, and then Prudence Kerrigan said, Come inside, Miss Everhart. Come inside and bring my boy's letter. Prudence Kerrigan's front room had not been used in nearly 3 years. That was the first thing Marigold understood, not the second thing. The second thing was that Prudence Kerrigan had not stopped keeping it. She had only stopped sitting in it. The lamp on the table was polished. The rug had been beaten within the month. There was a small vase on the sideboard that held nothing, not now, but that had held flowers Marigold could tell once, because a woman does not keep a vase on a sideboard for 3 empty years unless she is waiting for the day she can bear to fill it again. Prudence lit the lamp, because the shutters had been closed a long time. She sat down in a wooden chair, not in the good chair by the window. The good chair, Marigold understood, without being told, had been Ansell's, and it had been empty nearly 3 years. Marigold sat on the small settee. She took the letter out of her Bible. She held it in her lap. She did not hand it over yet, because a woman does not hand a mother her dead son's last letter without giving her a moment first. Prudence Kerrigan said, How did you find it? In a bundle of papers, in a storeroom at Cottonwood Fork. I was not looking. I was trying to line a shelf. You were trying to line a shelf. Yes, ma'am. And God put the letter in your hand. Marigold did not know how to answer that. She said, I do not know if it was God, but I do not know who else it would have been. Prudence Kerrigan closed her eyes. She said, Give it to me. Marigold gave it to her. Prudence read. She read slowly. She read the way a woman reads when she is memorizing something. she is not going to be allowed to keep. When she was done, she folded the letter. She held it against her chest. She said in a voice that was not steady, "My son did not write to me before he died. I know he wrote to Nathaniel Culpepper, not to me, and I have hated him for that for nearly 3 years now, because I thought he had spent his last week of life on Nathaniel and not on me. He spent his last week trying to protect you. I see that now." Prudence Kerrigan opened her eyes. They were the color of pale rain. She said, "Miss Everhart." "Marigold, Marigold, do you know what I have done? You have grieved Mrs. Kerrigan. I have done worse than that." She stood. She went to the sideboard. She opened a small drawer. She took out a folded square of yellow paper. She said, "The night Ansel died, I went to his room, and there was a letter on his desk, in his handwriting, sealed, addressed to Nathaniel. I took it, because I thought, if Nathaniel had done what they said, if my son had died because of him, then Nathaniel did not deserve to have my son's last words, any of them, so I took it." She held out the yellow paper. She said, "I burned the letter, but I could not bear to burn the outside, because it was his handwriting, and it was the last thing he ever wrote of Nathaniel's name, and so I saved this, and I have kept it in this drawer for nearly 3 years, and I never once suspected that there had been 2 letters, that the one you have was in the ranch already, that the one I burned, Miss Everhart, Marigold, I burned my son's warning." Marigold looked at the yellow paper, the address in a young man's careful hand, "Mr. Nathaniel Culpepper, Cottonwood Fork, to be delivered." She said, "Mrs. Kerrigan, do not say it. Mrs. Kerrigan, he would forgive you. That is not the same as being forgiven. I know. I have carried this in this drawer for nearly 3 years. I know. And I have kept the whole town hating a man because I could not bear to look at what I had done. I know." Marigold said, "Then how did the one in the storeroom get there?" Prudence Kerrigan closed her eyes. She said, "Ansel came to Cottonwood Fork the Saturday before he died. He left a hat there. He was always leaving hats. Nathaniel's mother, when she was alive, used to tease him about it. That storeroom was where the hats were kept in those days. If Ansel wrote 2 letters and meant to give Nathaniel the safer one first and leave the other on his own desk, then he might have slipped the safer one into the storeroom that Saturday, meaning to tell Nathaniel about it later, and later never came." Marigold said, "So he hid it in the hat closet." Prudence said, "In case he was searched." "Yes, I think he did. He was afraid, Marigold. He was afraid, and he did the smart thing. And he had a mother who did not know how to be smart, only how to be angry." Prudence Kerrigan sat down, not in the wooden chair. She sat down on the floor, at Marigold's feet, like a child. And Marigold, Everhart, 26 years old, from Zanesville, Ohio, with a mother 14 years in the ground and a father 3 months in one, slid off the settee and sat down on the floor beside her and put her arm around a woman who had hated her for 2 weeks and held her. They did not speak for a while. At last Prudence said, "What do we do?" Marigold said, "You come with me." "Where?" "To the parsonage, tonight." The parsonage. Mrs. Prentice says Reverend Halloway does not hold with judges who lie. He does not. He never has. Then we go to him, tonight, with the letter, and we ask him to stand with us at the hearing 3 weeks from now, and you and I are going to take Judge Radcliffe apart, piece by piece, in the sight of this valley and of God. Prudence Kerrigan looked at her. For a long moment, she said, Marigold Everhart. Nathaniel Culpepper sent for the wrong kind of wife. Did he? He sent for a wife. He got an army. I am not an army, Mrs. Kerrigan. You are today. They went to the parsonage after dark. Reverend Elias Halloway was a small man. I was 63 years old. He had a bald patch on the top of his head that he had given up combing hair over. He had ears too large for his face. He had spectacles he used only for reading. And he had Marigold understood the moment she sat down in his study, the calm iron of a man who had spent 40 years telling the truth quietly to people who did not want to hear it. He read the letter. He read it once. He set it down. He said, Mrs. Kerrigan, Miss Everhart, I would like to say I am surprised, but I am not going to lie to two women who came here to hear the truth. You are not surprised. I have known Cyrus Radcliffe 20 years. I have never been surprised by anything he has done, only by the number of people willing to believe he had not done it. He took off his spectacles. He rubbed his eyes. He said, there will need to be more than this. There will be. You know there will be. I know. He looked at Marigold. Have you written the surveyor at Cheyenne? I have. Then we wait for the answer. Meanwhile, Miss Everhart, Mrs. Kerrigan, I would ask a thing of you both. Ask. That letter does not leave this room in one piece. I keep the original in the church safe because I do not trust every door between here and the courthouse, and I would ask you, Mrs. Kerrigan, to make me a fair copy tonight in your own hand, so that if the original is taken, we still have a witness, and I would ask you, Miss Everhart, to swear an affidavit before me tomorrow morning as to where you found it and how, so that we can put the finding of the letter on the record. Are you willing? I am. Both of you. Both of us, Reverend Halloway said. Then let us pray. And they prayed, not the Lord's Prayer, something older and simpler. They prayed for a man in a cell in Elmwood. They prayed for the sons of two mothers. They prayed for the courage to open in 3 weeks' time a door that had been closed too long. The 3 weeks were the longest of her life. She did not visit Nathaniel in the jail, not because she was not permitted, because she was. Ellison had ridden into town the second day and had, by his own account, sat across from his brother at the little iron table in the sheriff's back office for 2 hours, and Nathaniel had said only when Ellison had asked how he was. He had said, do not bring her here. This is not a place for her. Ellison had said, she wants to come. Nathaniel had said, she always wants to come. That is not the point. So she did not go. She wrote him instead a letter a day, not long letters. He did not need long letters. He needed short ones. He needed to know the cattle were fed. He needed to know Micah was still splitting wood at first light. He needed to know Mrs. Prentice had put up the last of the apples. He needed to know she was well. She wrote him a letter every night at the kitchen table. She sealed each one. She rode into Elmwood every third day and left the 3 letters at the sheriff's desk in one bundle. The deputy, a young man named Willie Meacham, who had gone to the schoolhouse with Micah and remembered him kindly, would take them into the back, and an hour later bring back one from Nathaniel. His were shorter than hers, but they came. The first one said only, I received your letter. I am well. Thank you for the news of the cattle. N. The second one said, read scripture aloud in the evenings, even if I am not there to hear it. Micah likes it. N. The third one said, I am not afraid. Tell Mrs. Prentice. N. The fourth one said on the 10th day, I dreamed of my mother last night. She was walking on the porch. She was singing. I have not dreamed of her singing since I was 12. I do not know why I am telling you this, except that I have not had anyone to tell it to before. Anne Marigold read that letter 3 times. She read it standing in the front room by the window. She read it, and she folded it, and she put it inside her mother's Bible next to Ansel's letter, and she sat down in the good chair, and she wept for maybe 5 minutes, not more, because a woman with an army to run does not weep long, but she wept. The answer from the surveyor at Cheyenne came on the 16th day. It was a long envelope, sealed twice, delivered by hand by a young clerk who had ridden 2 days from Cheyenne on a fresh horse because the letter Marigold had sent had apparently been the most interesting letter that had crossed the surveyor's desk in a decade. Marigold opened it in the front kitchen with Ellison and Micah and Mrs. Prentice standing around her. She read. She said, "Oh." Ellison said, "Oh, what?" She said, "Oh, Ellison." She turned the letter around. The clerk had enclosed a certified copy of the true survey map of the west boundary of Cottonwood Fork Ranch, and beside it a certified copy of the map Judge Cyrus Radcliffe had filed with the county 3 years and 4 months ago, which was the year Ansel Kerrigan had died. The 2 maps did not match. The map on file with the county placed the north boundary of Cottonwood Fork 300 yards south of where the true survey placed it, which put the spring on the county's paper on land that belonged on the county's paper to no one, which meant that if the Culpeppers were ever forced off Cottonwood Fork, say, by a criminal conviction, say, by a debt they could not pay, say, by hanging, then the spring would revert to unclaimed land and could be filed on by any man who happened to know it was there, which was not many, which was one. The clerk had written a note on the bottom of the letter. He had written, "Miss Everhart, the filed map is in Judge Radcliffe's own handwriting, signed by him, dated. The Territorial Surveyor's Office has already opened a file on this matter and would very much like to speak with you at your earliest convenience. We will be sending an investigator on Monday next." Ellison put his hand over his mouth. Micah said, "God in heaven." Mrs. Prentice sat down on the bench. Marigold said, "Ellison." "Yes." "Take me to town." "Ma'am, the hearing is not for another 5 days. I do not care about the hearing. I care about tonight." "What is tonight?" "Tonight I want to be sitting in the front row of that church on Sunday, and I want Prudence Kerrigan sitting beside me, and I want the map on Reverend Halloway's pulpit, and I want every soul in Elmwood to sit through his sermon knowing what I know, because when they walk out of that church on Sunday afternoon, they will have already made up their minds, and when the judge convenes his hearing on Wednesday, the whole valley will already be against him, and a jury from a valley that has already made up its mind is not a jury Cyrus Radcliffe can bribe." And Ellison said quietly, "Ma'am, you have gone and become a strategist." Marigold said, "I have become a wife." She said it before she thought about it. The word wife. She had not said that word yet, not aloud, not since she had come. It stopped her. Ellison, who did not smile, smiled. He said, "Yes, ma'am, you have." The Sunday sermon in Elmwood in the 3rd week of October, 1878, became a thing that people in that valley would speak of quietly for the rest of their lives. Not because Reverend Halloway shouted. He did not. He never shouted. But he stood at his pulpit on a cold, bright morning with the light coming through the east windows, and the pews packed shoulder to shoulder, because word had gone around the valley that the widow Kerrigan had been seen walking to the parsonage after dark, and word had gone around that the mail-order bride at Cottonwood Fork had been asking questions, and Reverend Halloway opened his Bible. He read from the book of Proverbs. He read, "A false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape." He closed the Bible. He said, "Brothers and sisters, 3 years ago this church buried a young man named Ansel Kerrigan, and this town in the days that followed buried something else. It buried the truth." The room went very still. He said, "I am not going to preach this morning. I am going to read." And he took out Ansel's letter. He read it aloud, the whole thing. The room did not breathe. When he was done, he said, "There is more, but that is enough for a Sunday morning. The rest we'll keep for Wednesday. I ask you only this: when you leave this house today, when you go home to your dinner, when you sit down at your table with your children, ask yourself, have I judged rightly in this valley? In these 3 years, have I judged rightly? Because there is a man in a jail cell 4 blocks from where you sit right now who has been judged wrong for 3 years." He looked out over the pews. He said, "Let us pray." They prayed. Marigold sat in the front row. Prudence Kerrigan sat beside her in lavender, not black, because that morning before dawn, Prudence Kerrigan had gone into her upstairs closet and had, for the first time in more than 3 years, put on a color. The church emptied slowly. People did not know what to say. They did not say much. But as they filed past, more than one woman touched Prudence Kerrigan's hand, and more than one man tipped his hat to Marigold. And a farmer named Josiah Whittaker, who Marigold had never seen before, stopped in the aisle and said, "Miss Everhart, I have 4 sons, and I have been telling them the wrong story about Nathaniel Culpepper for 3 years. I would take it as a kindness if you would tell him when next you see him that Josiah Whittaker was wrong, and is ashamed, and would like to shake his hand." Marigold said, "I will tell him, sir." The farmer went out. Prudence Kerrigan looked at Marigold. She said, "You will need a bigger front room." "What for?" "For all the men who are going to want to shake his hand." The hearing convened on Wednesday. The courthouse in Elmwood was not much of a courthouse. It was the front room of the county building, a pot-bellied stove, a raised platform for the judge, 3 rows of benches, a little table for the accused. Judge Cyrus Radcliffe was not on the bench. That had been decided by a letter from the Territorial Surveyor's office in Cheyenne. That letter had arrived on Tuesday morning. That letter had asked formally that Judge Radcliffe recuse himself on grounds that were listed in 12 numbered paragraphs. The circuit judge who had come up from Laramie to sit instead was a man named Willem Root. He was 70 years old. He wore no black robe. He wore a gray suit. He had a face like a hunting hawk and eyes to match. The prosecutor was Judge Radcliffe's nephew. He tried to speak. Judge Root said, "Sit down, young man." The nephew sat. Judge Root said, "I have read the papers in this matter. I have read them twice. I have also read the letter from the Territorial Surveyor. I have also read a document submitted under seal from the pastor of this town. Before we begin, is Cyrus Radcliffe in the courtroom?" He was, in the back, in his black frock coat, silver watch chain, iron gray hair, blue steel eyes. He stood. He said, "I am your honor." Judge Root said, "Sit down, sir. You are not being addressed. You are being observed." He turned. He said, Bring the accused. They brought Nathanael in. He had lost weight. He had not shaved. He was thin at the wrists, but he walked with his back straight. And when he came into the courtroom, his eyes went first before anywhere else to the front row, where Marigold sat, where Prudence Kerrigan sat, where Ellison and Micah sat, where Mrs. Prentice sat, where behind them on rows and rows of benches every seat was taken, and people stood at the back, and people stood in the doorway, and people stood outside the door in the cold, because they could not fit in the room, but they had come anyway. The whole valley had come. Nathaniel Culpepper looked at Marigold, and for the first time since she had known him, he smiled, not the shadow of a smile, an actual smile, the kind that happens on the face of a man who has just seen a thing he had not dared for 3 years to hope for. He sat. Judge Root said, "Reverend Holloway, come forward." The Reverend came. He was sworn. He read the letter. He held up the 2 survey maps. He explained quietly and precisely what the 2 maps showed, and what they meant, and why a man who had once filed the wrong one might 3 years later want the last living witnesses to that filing gone. Then he stepped down. Judge Root said, "Mrs. Kerrigan." Prudence stood. She was sworn. She spoke for 11 minutes. She told them how she had taken her son's letter the night he died, how she had burned it, how she had blamed Nathaniel Culpepper for nearly 3 years, how she had learned 2.5 weeks ago that she had blamed the wrong man. She told the truth about her own hand in it. She did not spare herself. When she was done, the courtroom was silent. Judge Root said, "Mrs. Kerrigan, thank you." Prudence said, "Your Honor, if I may, there is one more thing." "Say it." She turned. She looked at Nathaniel Culpepper. She said in a voice that carried the length of the courtroom, "Nathaniel, I am asking your forgiveness in front of God and these people and my son who is not here to ask it for himself. I am asking your forgiveness." Nathaniel Culpepper stood at the little table. He could not speak. He did not need to. He shook his head once, slow, twice. He mouthed, "You do not need to ask." But she had asked, and so he mouthed also, "I forgive you." And Prudence Kerrigan sat down, and a sound went through the courtroom, not a cheer, not applause, something older than either, the sound of 250 people breathing out at once. Judge Root said, "Miss Everhart." Marigold stood. She was sworn. She told them how she had come to Wyoming as a mail-order bride. She told them about the letter she had found in the storeroom. She told them about the survey she had ordered. She told them everything. She did not weep. She did not need to. Cyrus Radcliffe sat in the back. His face did not move, but his hands on the pew in front of him went white at the knuckles. Judge Root said, "Miss Everhart, thank you. You may sit." She sat. Judge Root looked at his papers. He looked at Nathaniel. He looked at Cyrus Radcliffe. He said, "This matter is dismissed. All charges, with prejudice. Mr. Culpepper, you are free." He said, "Mr. Radcliffe." Cyrus Radcliffe stood. Judge Root said, "You are hereby ordered to remain in Elmwood pending the arrival of a federal marshal from Cheyenne who will be here Friday. There will be a separate hearing on matters of fraud, perjury, and conspiracy to commit murder. I am not conducting it here today, but I want you to know it is coming. Sheriff." The sheriff, who had spent the last 20 minutes looking as though he had never met Judge Radcliffe in his life, stepped forward. The sheriff put the handcuffs on Cyrus Radcliffe himself. The courtroom emptied, but slowly, because 250 people all wanted at once to shake Nathaniel Culpepper's hand. He shook every one of them, even the ones who did not deserve to have their hands shook. He shook theirs too, because he was not a small man, and a big man does not spend his afternoon holding a grudge on the day of his own freedom. Marigold stood at the back of the courtroom. She let him have this, because it was his, and because she had learned in the last 3 weeks that you do not run at a man in a moment like this. You wait. He came to her last. He stopped in front of her. He did not touch her. Not yet. Not with 250 people still watching. He took off his hat. He said, Marigold. She said, Nathaniel. He said, will you marry me? Properly, in that church, before Reverend Holloway, with those people watching, now that they know what they know. She said, yes. He said, this coming Sunday. She said, yes. He said, I will meet you at the door. She said, I will be there. He put his hat back on. He walked with her out into the October afternoon. The valley stood in the street. The valley clapped. That is not a small thing for a man who had walked out of his own house 3 years ago and not been clapped for since. They were married the following Sunday. Reverend Holloway performed the ceremony. Prudence Kerrigan sat in the front row in dove gray, now not black, not lavender, gray, because gray was what a woman wore in that valley when she was still in mourning but was beginning to walk toward what was ahead. Ellison stood on Nathaniel's right. Micah stood on his left. Micah wept openly. He had not wept, Mrs. Prentice said later, since he was 8 years old. Mrs. Prentice walked Marigold down the aisle because Marigold had no father to do it. And Mrs. Prentice said, when Marigold asked her to, child, I have been waiting to walk one of my boy's brides down an aisle for 30 years. Do not deny me the joy. The church was full. Josiah Whitaker was there. The stagecoach driver was there. He had come 3 days from his home station to be there, and he tipped his hat to Marigold as she passed, and he said, quiet only she heard him, ma'am, I told you at the fork not to disbelieve them all, but I could have said different, and I am ashamed I did not. I brought you the yellow flowers on your bedside table the day you came. That was me. That was as much as I dared. She stopped. She looked at him. I was a man of maybe 50, beard gone gray at the corners of his mouth, weathered hands loose at his sides. She said, you picked those flowers. I picked them, and I gave them to Mrs. Prentice because I thought, if she comes, if she really comes, she should walk into a room that had flowers in it. Marigold's throat closed. She said, thank you. He said, thank you, ma'am, for staying. She walked the rest of the aisle. The vows were the usual vows, except she said them in the voice of a woman who meant them, and he said them in the voice of a man who had not been sure 3 months ago that he would ever get to. The ring he put on her finger was his mother's. She had not known that. He whispered it to her at the altar. Was hers. I took it out this morning from that door. I opened the door, Marigold. For the first time in 5 years, I opened it, and I took the ring, and I closed it again. But it opened, and I opened it, and it did not break me. She could not speak. She only nodded. Reverend Holloway said, you may kiss the bride. He kissed her. Once, gentle, the way a man kisses a woman he has decided to spend the rest of his life kissing. The church rose. 2 years pass. The way years pass on a Wyoming ranch, slowly, and then all at once, and then slowly again. Cyrus Radcliffe was tried in a federal court in Cheyenne the following spring. He was convicted on all counts. He served 11 years in the federal penitentiary at Detroit. He died there, in his sleep, in his 8th year. Marigold read the notice in a Cheyenne newspaper. She said a prayer over the notice, not for Cyrus Radcliffe, for herself, because a woman who has fought a man that hard should pray when he dies for her own heart, so that she does not become the thing she fought. Ellison Culpepper began, in the spring of the first year, to court a school teacher in Elmwood. She was a widow. She had a little girl of 6. Ellison married her the following autumn. He built a house on the east quarter of Cottonwood Fork, above the creek. He did not smile often, but he smiled at the school teacher's little girl, and he smiled at the little girl's mother. And when Micah teased him about smiling, he said quiet, "I have my reasons." Micah did not marry, not yet. He said, when Marigold asked that he was waiting, she said, "For what?" He said, "For the woman who reads scripture aloud in a voice I have not heard yet. When I hear it, I will know." Mrs. Prentice stayed because she was 71 years old and she had raised 3 Culpepper boys, and now she said she had one more baby to raise. Whether she was needed or not, she was staying, because in the second spring, in the little upstairs room that had once been a spare, that Marigold had turned into a nursery with her own hands, with Micah's help, because Micah was a carpenter and had built the cradle himself out of cottonwood. In that nursery, at sunrise on a morning in April, Marigold Culpepper delivered a daughter. She was a small baby. She had her father's watchful gray eyes. She had her mother's stubborn chin. Nathaniel came into the room. He had not been permitted to come in until it was done. He came in when Mrs. Prentice called him. He sat on the edge of the bed. He took his daughter into his arms, and for the second time in Marigold's knowledge of him, he wept. She said, "What shall we call her?" He said, "Amabel." Amabel. It was my mother's second name, Elowen Amabel Culpepper. Amabel. And her middle name? Yes, Ansel. Marigold said, "Ansel." Nathaniel said, "Because I would not have been alive to father her without him." Marigold said, "Amabel Ansel Culpepper." She said the name. She said it a second time. She said it a third. She looked at her husband. She said, "Nathaniel." "Yes." "Take her to Prudence." He looked at her. Now, this afternoon, as soon as I can travel. Take us both. I want to put this baby in Prudence Kerrigan's arms myself, and I want her to hear the middle name from you, not from anyone else." He said, "Yes, ma'am." They went that afternoon. Prudence Kerrigan opened her front door. She saw them. She saw the baby. She said nothing. Marigold walked up the porch board where she had once knelt. She put the baby in Prudence Kerrigan's arms. She said, "Amabel Ansel Culpepper, meet your grandmother." Prudence Kerrigan looked down at the little face in her arms, and she did not weep. She had wept enough in this life. She only kissed the baby's forehead and said so quietly that Marigold barely heard, "Hello, my little one. Hello." She looked up at Marigold. She said, "You are going to bring her to see me often." "Every week." "Every week is not enough. Every 3 days then. That will do." Prudence held Amabel Ansel Culpepper for a long time. She did not give her back. Nathaniel did not ask her to. And in that valley, in that year, and for many years after, the Culpepper Ranch at Cottonwood Fork became again what it had once been, a working ranch, a house full of light, a porch where a man sat in the evenings with his wife beside him, and later a small daughter on his knee. The door at the end of the hall was no longer locked. Marigold had opened it one afternoon in the second spring with Nathaniel beside her, because he had asked her to be beside him when he did it. They had gone in together. They had aired the room. They had opened the trunk of his mother's things, her wedding dress, her hymnal, a packet of pressed flowers, a small wooden horse of Barnaby's, a drawing Barnaby had made in colored chalks of a house with 3 brothers standing outside it, and a mother in the doorway and a sun in the sky with a face. They had wept, both of them, but softly, the way people weep who know that grief at last has a place to sit that is not their own chest. They had turned the room in time into a sewing room for Marigold, because Nathaniel had said, "My mother would want this room used. She was a woman who used a room." The hymnal came out of the trunk. It went on the shelf in the front room next to Micah's books. The little wooden horse came out. It sat on the shelf in Amabel's nursery. Barnaby's drawing came out. Nathaniel framed it himself. He hung it above the front door so that everyone who walked in saw it first. A house, 3 brothers, a mother in the doorway, a son with a face, and in the evenings when the work was done, when the day had settled, when the light came in gold and long across the valley of Cottonwood Fork, Nathaniel Culpepper could be found exactly where a mended man ought to be found, home, unhurried, beside a woman who had come across 4 states on money she did not have to spare, who had knelt on a porch board and prayed a prayer she was not sure would be answered, who had brought a bundle of yellow prairie flowers back into a valley that had forgotten what yellow flowers were for, who had in the end done the only thing a woman can ever really do for a man who has been closed too long. She had waited. She had waited the way you wait on weather, patient, unhurried, trusting that the sky would eventually do what skies do, and the sky had, and so had he.